Today is September 1st, 2024, and we have a very special guest on the show today, Jesse Nevel. Jesse Nevel is the national chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, the mass organization of the African People's Solidarity Committee. Jesse is also a member of the Uhuru 3, something we'll be discussing in depth today. The Uhuru 3 are Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, or the APSP, Penny Hess, Chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the APSC, and Jesse Nevel, the Chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, or the USM. In April 2023, the Uhuru 3 were indicted by the US government on bogus charges of being agents of a foreign government because of the Uhuru Movement's over 50 years of work to advocate for the liberation and unification of Africa and forcibly dispersed African people everywhere. The federal criminal trial against Jesse and the other members of the Uhuru 3 starts in less than 2 days on Tuesday, September 3rd. Jesse, it's truly an honor to have you on the show, and thank you for taking the time to come on the show, particularly so close to the trial.
Thank you, Chris.
So before we jump into the upcoming trial and the allegations against you, for those in the audience that might not be aware, can you please give a little background about the critically important work of the African People's Socialist Party and the African People's Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement?
Yes, absolutely. And again, I want to thank you, Chris, and I also want to thank Ryan and the Activist News Network for shedding light on this incredibly important case several times over the last 2 years and being an important part of the Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back campaign from day one. And as you mentioned, the Hands Off Uhuru campaign was formed in response to a vicious assault by the United States government against the African People's Socialist Party and its founder and leader, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. The African People's Socialist Party is an organization that has its origins in the Black Power movement of the 1960s. Chairman Omali Yeshitela was, in the 1960s, a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, a leading member of that organization in St. Petersburg, Florida. And he formed the first membership-based chapter of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which the chairman has described as being the bridge between the struggle for civil rights and the struggle for Black power. And he was a key part of that. And then in 1966, Chairman Omali Yeshitela formed the Junta of Militant Organizations, JOMO, which then in 1972 merged with two other African liberation organizations to create the African People's Socialist Party. And this is a revolutionary organization of African people, meaning Black people throughout the world, who identify as one African nation that has been forcibly dispersed by the system of colonialism and slavery for the last 600 years. And the goal of the African People's Socialist Party is the total liberation and unification of Africa and African people everywhere. For African people in the United States and around the world to have political and economic power over their own lives, over their own resources, over their own communities, and the destinies of their children. And in fighting for that goal, the African People's Socialist Party has created many different mass organizations and economic development institutions that are about building dual power in the hands of the African working class, anti-colonial power in the hands of African working class people. One of the things that Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party did 4 years after their founding in the year 1976 is they created a white solidarity committee under their leadership called the African People's Solidarity Committee, which was created to extend the struggle for Black power and African liberation into the white colonizer population, into the communities of colonial settlers, those of us in the white population who sit on the pedestal of the oppression and enslavement and exploitation of African people historically, as well as the genocide against the indigenous people of this land and the theft of their land and their continued genocidal conditions that the indigenous people face up to this very day. And that organization was called the African People's Solidarity Committee. And Penny Hess, who is also one of the Uhuru Three, along with Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who is the primary target of this attack. Penny Hess was there at the founding conference of the African People's Solidarity Committee in 1976, and she's been the chair of APSC under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party ever since. So the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is the mass organization of APSC, and that's what I have the honor to be the chair of as a member of APSC. So our job is to take this message out to the masses of white people, to win white people from all backgrounds and all different walks of life, to recognize that our true interests as human beings are not to side with this colonial mode of production that expects our complicity, that expects our unity when it carries out war and atrocities and genocide against African and colonized peoples around the world for our benefit. That is not in our interests, because that system is going down. African and oppressed peoples are going to win their liberation. And our true interests are in unity and solidarity with African and colonized peoples. And the way we can make that a reality is through genuine solidarity, through working for reparations, the return of the stolen resources and wealth that are hoarded in the white community, returning those resources into the hands of African people fighting for the liberation and self-determination of African and oppressed peoples worldwide.
Thanks. So we've had Chairman Omali Yeshitela on the show a couple times in the past, August 2022, and most recently in May of 2023, to discuss the U.S. government's attack on the APSP and the Uhuru Movement. Mm-hmm. But for those in the audience that might not be aware, can you tell us about what happened to the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru Movement on July 29th, 2022?
Yes, definitely. And I would encourage people also to go to handsoffuhuru.org, and there is a 3-minute video that shows actual security camera footage of what happened on that day. It was July 29th, 2022. It was a Friday. And at 5 a.m. in St. Louis, Missouri, where the African People's Socialist Party currently has its main headquarters, and 6 a.m. in St. Petersburg, Florida, where the party was created originally. So this was coordinated to happen at the same time in 2 different time zones. The United States government deployed their secret political police agency called the FBI to execute an incredibly violent military-style SWAT raid on 7 homes and offices of the Uhuru Movement and the African People's Socialist Party. They came to the home of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the deputy chair of the African People's Socialist Party, Zene Yeshitela. They came to their home in St. Louis, Missouri at 5 a.m., which is reminiscent of how they came, as the chairman has pointed out, how they came for Fred Hampton in 1969 in Chicago, the Black Panther leader. They came at 4 a.m. to his home to assassinate him. They came to the chairman and deputy chair's home at 5 a.m. and had loudspeakers outside blaring, a voice on the loudspeaker blaring, saying, "This is the FBI. Come out with your hands up and nothing in your hands. Follow orders. This is the FBI." The chairman came down the stairs of his home and was met with red laser sights of assault rifles aimed at his chest. And a drone flew past him and up through the stairs and nearly hit Deputy Chair Ona in the face as this drone was sent up into their the second floor of the building where they live in their apartment. And they had armored vehicles, they had tanks, they had flashbang grenades that they were setting off. They came with assault rifles, handguns. They handcuffed and zip tied Chairman Omali and Deputy Chair behind their backs and told them to sit on the curb, which they refused to do because that was a typical attempt by the state to try to humiliate and degrade African people by making them sit on the curb in their own community. They refused to do that. And they proceeded to loot their home and these other 6 homes and offices, which included the Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida, the Uhuru Solidarity Center in St. Louis, Missouri, which is in the white community, which has a banner that says "Unity Through Reparations." I live in the apartment above that center along with my comrade and wife, Amanda. We were also targeted by these raids. Penny Hess and another member of APSC, Kitty Riley, their home was raided. Akile Anai, who's a brilliant leader within the African People's Socialist Party, she was raided. Her car was searched by the FBI. And the Uhuru House, again, they came with an army of FBI agents to ransack and raid this headquarters. And we came to find out later that day that, and they, by the way, they didn't even show search warrants to the chairman and others until way later. They managed to produce some search warrant. And we were informed at some point during that process that these raids were connected to an indictment that had been unsealed in the Middle District of Florida of a Russian national for some alleged conspiracy to sow discord in the United States by using people in the United States as pawns in this sinister, absurd Russian plot to sow discord and undermine so-called U.S. democracy. And 9 months after that, so even though we were handcuffed at gunpoint on July 29th, nobody was arrested that day. 9 months later, the grand jury in Tampa, Florida, handed down a superseding indictment, which now included, along with this Russian person, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Chairwoman Penny Hess, and myself, who are now known as the Uhuru Three, as being indicted under charges of conspiracy against the United States government and illegally working as secret agents of Russia in a plot to sow dissension within the United States. And before going to your next question, I would just say that the chairman and the Uhuru Three, Penny Hess and myself, we are not guilty of these bogus charges. But beyond that, the charges are an insult to anyone's intelligence, that we would be expected to believe that Black people in the United States, that Chairman Omali Yeshitela, of all people, would require Russians or anyone else to teach him and to tell him that his people are facing oppression, that his people have a right to fight for their liberation. The chairman has said it explicitly from the very beginning. No Russian had to tell Chairman Omali Yeshitela to fight for the liberation of African people. That has been his life's work for over 60 years. He's 82 years old, and he has given his entire life to ending colonialism, fighting for reparations, fighting for a world of genuine peace and justice where all human beings can live with no one exploiting another and no one profiting off the suffering of another. And to attempt to liquidate that history, liquidate this struggle by African people by reducing it to some contrived and preposterous, narrative of Russian influence and Russian control is absolutely slanderous and even racist. So this is essentially what they've charged us with, and we are set to go to trial the day after tomorrow in the federal court in Tampa, Florida. And they are intending to put Chairman Omali Yeshitela in prison for the rest of his life. Penny Hess, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and I, we face charges that, if found guilty, would carry a maximum 15-year prison sentence. So this is a very serious assault on the African liberation movement, and it's a very serious assault on free speech. Everything that they have charged Chairman Omali and the Uhuru movement of doing, supposedly on behalf of the, quote, Russian government, is free speech. Publishing articles, holding events, doing Zoom webinars, doing a petition to charge the United States government with the crime of genocide against African people in this country. All of this is speech consistent with the political mission which the chairman and the party have been relentlessly pursuing for over 50 years. And this is what they're trying to criminalize. They're trying to erode and dismantle the First Amendment by creating a precedent whereby they can charge anyone at any time for a crime for saying something they don't like, simply by saying that some other government told you to say it, simply on the basis that your views may align from time to time with the views of another government. So this is what happened on July 29th and where it's brought us to this day. And we're very confident that we can win. We have an incredible movement that Chairman Omali has worked to build, an anti-colonial free speech movement that is standing up to defend the African People's Socialist Party as champions of the right of all of the people to have freedom of speech and political expression. And we are confident that we will come out of this with a victory, and the people will come out of this with a victory once this trial is over and done with.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's clear for anyone who is paying attention even a little bit that this is a very cynical attempt to stop, revolutionary and work that's being done on behalf of the people. And
Yes.
yeah, I really encourage people to go and watch that video that was put together and is posted on the handsoffUhuru.org website. Uh, it's one thing to hear it described. It's another thing to see the armored personnel carriers parked in a residential neighborhood and, dozens of highly armed military personnel flooding into these homes with the intention to kill and maim.
Yes.
And, uh, the flashbang that was used in the chairman's house using explosive devices, it's really really appalling, and I think speaks to the nature of this country.
Yes.
And you were speaking, and it was reminding us of the long duration of the Red Scare, Black Scare. The Uhuru Three are mentioned at the end of Sharice Burdenstelli's book, Red Scare, Black Scare. Highly recommend everybody watching to pick up that book and read it to understand the decades-long context of anti-Black, anti-radical repression that the U.S. government is now using against the Uhuru Three. So what is your reaction to the fact that this attack against you and the other members of the Uhuru Three are being done not under a Trump administration or by the Republicans, but primarily the Democrats, and namely the Biden-Harris administration?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point, and I think it shows you that the real dividing line is not between whether it's a Republican or a Democrat or so-called left wing or right wing. The dividing line is the colonial question, the struggle by colonized people, African people, indigenous people, the Mexican people, the Palestinian people, all colonized peoples around the world who are fighting for self-determination. And Biden has been an enemy of that struggle from the very beginning of his political career as an operative of U.S. imperialism. He was notoriously opposed to many of the central tenets of the Civil Rights Bill. In his early years as a senator, he was notoriously opposed to busing as a solution, federally mandated busing as a means by which to address the conditions faced by African people. He was notoriously responsible for authoring the Omnibus Crime Bill in 1994 that flooded the streets of African communities in this country with over 100,000 police and rapidly expanded the mass incarceration of African people. And, of course, as vice president to Barack Obama and as U.S. president, he's proven himself to be a brutal henchman of the colonial ruling class time and time again. So I think that it's not surprising that this would happen under the Biden-Harris administration, and I think that this case has really brought to light that this is the dividing line, and the question that everybody has to answer now is not about whether or not you're a Trump or a Kamala Harris supporter or a left or whatever, like the chairman says, a left colonizer or a right colonizer, but where do you stand on the struggle of African people for self-determination? And I think that's what's been so powerful about the Hands Off Uhuru campaign, is that people from what might appear to be across the quote unquote political and ideological spectrum have rallied behind Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Uhuru Movement. And I would say this just quickly so we can get to the next question, but the question of free speech is something that a lot of people in this country are very concerned about. They're concerned about seeing a closure of the space for open political expression. And what the US government has done, ironically, with this assault on Chairman Omali and the APSP is that they have positioned the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman Omali Yeshitela to be the defenders of the principle of free speech and the First Amendment right to political expression against the United States government, which is in theory is supposed to be upholding those principles and which created those principles and ostensibly is supposed to be enforcing them. But here you have the African People's Socialist Party, which actually stands at the front of the barricades defending the people's right to free speech against that very government. And, you know, that's why the chairman has said this case is the canary in the coal mine. They are using the attack on the African People's Socialist Party as a test case to see how far they can go in limiting free speech. And they're choosing to single out an African organization, an African leader, an African revolutionary leader, because they make this assumption that if they single out and target a Black organization, that white people will ignore it or will even support that. And we from the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, you know, we don't believe that's the case. We believe there are millions of white people who can hear the message of solidarity, who can hear the message of reparations, who can hear the message of anti-colonial free speech, and who can see that if you attack Chairman Omali Yeshitela's right to free speech, you attack everybody's right to free speech. And on the other side of that is when Chairman Omali wins, we all win. Everybody wins. Free speech wins. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for that. So another issue we wanted to ask you about is why the FBI, the DOJ, and the Biden administration is targeting you and the other members of the APSP and the Uhuru Movement, which have never interfered with a single election, yet they let entities like AIPAC that openly interfere in U.S. elections on behalf of the Israel thrive. And just to also add that, you know, major think tanks like the Brookings Institute and receive tens of millions of dollars from foreign governments such as the UAE and the UK and Norway. So, Jesse, what is your reaction to this glaring hypocrisy?
That is such an important point, Chris. Thank you for raising that and for exposing that. You know, the United States government is charging Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Uhuru Movement with this crime. It's called 18 U.S. Code Section 951, or the Agents of Foreign Governments Act, which has a 10-year prison sentence, by the way. So that's one of the charges, and the basis for that charge is the allegation that the chairman and Penny and I were operating under the control and direction of the Russian government without registering with the Attorney General's office. That is a complete lie, obviously. The Uhuru Movement has never operated under the direction or control of any government or any entity or organization other than itself, other than the struggle for African liberation. The United States government, in my view, does not actually think Chairman Omali Yeshitela, after 40, 50 years of struggle for Black freedom, in 2014 suddenly decided to start a new career as a secret agent for Russia. I think they know he has fought for African people and African liberation, and that is why they're attacking him, not because they actually believe that he was working on behalf of a foreign government. But if they did actually believe that he was working on behalf of a foreign government, and that was the reason why they came with armored vehicles and flashbang grenades and assault rifles, then what you said is absolutely correct. Then we would know they were serious, because they would also be bringing flashbang grenades and assault rifles and armored vehicles to every AIPAC office in this country and to the entire Zionist lobbying establishment. And every other Washington think tank, so-called think tank and lobbying firm that openly operate as arms of governments, of other governments around the world, especially Israel, but also other governments like you named, to the tune of millions of dollars. So it is a glaring hypocrisy. It helps to speak to the absolute absurdity of these charges. And, you know, when they talk about election interference, they're talking about the fact that in 2017 and 2019, the Uhuru Movement ran candidates for office in St. Petersburg, Florida. Okay, so like the chairman says, the only thing Russian about that is that the name of the city is St. Petersburg, not St. Petersburg, Russia, St. Petersburg, Florida. But we ran for mayor and city council, Akile Anai and myself, in 2017, and then Akile ran in 2019, and it was on a platform of reparations to the Black community, ending gentrification, ending police violence, and you know, this is an example of the African liberation movement fighting for the right for the electoral process to be accessible to African people. That is something that the Black community has fought and died historically for, the right to vote and participate in the electoral process. So again, it's an absolute insult to now turn around and say, well, actually, this was the product of Russian influence or Russian intervention. It's a complete lie, and that will be absolutely and utterly exposed throughout the course of this trial.
Great. So as your trial rapidly approaches, how can the audience stand in solidarity and support you and the other members of the Uhuru 3 as you head to trial on Tuesday?
Well, what you are doing and what this platform is doing is really important. Continuing to talk about this case, continuing to let the world know it's happening. The U.S. government is attempting to hold essentially a legal lynching of Chairman Omali Yeshitela in the federal court in just a couple of days, and we cannot let that happen in the shadows. The eyes of the world have to be upon the Uhuru 3 and Chairman Omali in Tampa, Florida this September. So talk about this case, let others know about it. Go to handsoffuhuru.org and find out more. And also people can donate to the ongoing legal fund, handsoffuhuru.org/donate. And if you can come to Florida, come to Tampa, Florida, and participate in the Freedom Summer project that the Uhuru Movement is holding right now, a massive outreach and political organizing campaign that includes packing the courthouse every single day. We want to have a packed courthouse for every day of this trial. So we invite people to come. The trial starts on Tuesday, September 3rd, and is expected to last a month. So if you can come for a day, if you can come for a week, if you can come for the whole month, go to handsoffuhuru.org/trial. You can sign up, and organizers will be in touch with you about how you can plug in and get involved and be a part of this historic victory.
Awesome. Thank you. Those are all the questions we had prepared for you today. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss or mention before we come to a close here?
I just want to thank you again, and I'll just close by saying, hands off Chairman Omali Yeshitela. We're confident that the African liberation movement will win, the people will win, truth will win, free speech will win. And I also want to say, free Palestine from the river to the sea, and free Leonard Peltier, and victory to the indigenous people. Uhuru.
So, Jesse Nevel, thank you again for coming on the show. It's really been an honor to speak with you. And, you know, you have countless supporters that are standing in solidarity with you and the other members of the Uhuru 3. Hands off the Uhuru 3.
Thank you.